If an ACO fails APP Plus reporting in 2025, how would that impact them if they don't have any shared savings to lose? And does it make a difference if the contract is two-sided?
Wow, great question, Jason. Now, there's likely to be an effect in either case, whether it's one-sided or a two-sided ACO contract. Uh, the range and the scope of the effects differ for the one versus the two-sided contracts. Now, if it's two-sided, that means, for those of you just tuning in, that the ACO is contracted to share in savings and in losses. That's what makes an ACO an advanced APM. Now, if there are neither savings nor losses for the year, their participating NPIs who have QP status, that is the qualified participant status, will not suffer from a low or absent quality score. So it is tempting and maybe for some of you wise not to invest in quality reporting if you're expecting to have a poor score. Although that's a whole nother issue. We could maybe I'll extend on that at some other point. If there's savings, the APP Plus score must hit at least the quality standard or higher to collect all of the shared savings due. But even a low score can qualify for partial collection of the shared savings. Now, if there's a loss without a quality score, the ACO's share of losses is at the maximum. A score at or above the quality threshold reduces the loss. Now, there are often MIPS liabilities, and this is the issue for whether if you're considering not investing in quality reporting at all. There are often MIPS liabilities, even in advanced APMs, and the lack of an effective APP Plus submission could be important. And I'll explain that shortly. Now, if it's a one-sided contract, that means that the ACO is contracted to share in savings, but not losses. Or there could be in the agreement what Medicare calls a nominal share of the loss, a small amount of loss, which is not enough to qualify for advanced APM status. Now, those ACOs are considered MIPS APMs. They're in an advanced payment model. They still have some benefits of being in that advanced payment model, but they're still liable for MIPS. Now, all of the participants in an ACO that it's a MIPS APM are still subject to MIPS scoring and adjustments. So if there are no shared savings for the year, there's no savings for the year to share in, the APP Plus score is irrelevant to the collection of shared savings. If you know you're not going to score well, there will be no revenue boost from shared savings to pay for the reporting effort. There is, though, a MIPS implication that needs to be considered. Now, there's always MIPS implication in ACO contracts that are considered MIPS APM contracts. There are usually MIPS implications in ACO contracts that are considered advanced APM contracts. The MIPS implication in those advanced APO contracts, or the so-called two-sided contracts, tracks to QP, qualified participant status. QP status depends on the percentage of patients seen or the revenue generated that relates to Medicare patients in general versus the ACO attributed Medicare patients. So if you have hit those markers, those thresholds, on one threshold you become a qualified participant. With a lower threshold, you become a partially qualified participant. All participants in ACOs of the MIPS APM type have a MIPS liability. Non-QP status participants in ACOs of the advanced APM type have a MIPS liability unless there's another reason that they're excused from MIPS, like small or low revenue threshold practices. Let me mention here that the partial QP applicant to a partial QP is someone who hits a lower threshold but not the full threshold to become a qualified participant. Partial QPs have choice. So if they choose to be MIPS liable, these comments apply to them. If they choose not to be, then they don't apply to them. The APP Plus submission has 3 implications for all ACOs, both MIPS APM and advanced APM style ACOs. First, it determines the qualification to collect any shared savings generated. You hit the threshold and you collect all your shared savings, and there's a kind of a phase-in approach even under the performance threshold where you collect part of your shared savings. Second, it can protect against full liability for shared losses. It doesn't hit you completely if you meet or exceed the quality standard. And here's the important part. Third, it serves as a MIPS quality score for MIPS liable participants in the ACO. So any of your participants who are liable for MIPS can use the APP or the APP Plus data quality submission as their MIPS quality score. Now, MIPS liable participants who don't have a MIPS score at all will suffer a full 9% negative adjustment on all Medicare Part B payments. 9% is a big loss. Even a low quality score, when considered in combination with the other ACO relevant scoring dynamics, can eliminate or at least significantly reduce the potential negative MIPS adjustments. And that could be very important and should be taken into consideration as you think about whether or not to make that APP Plus submission. Now, you should be considering for your MIPS liable participants as an ACO, or they should be considering for themselves an alternative MIPS quality submission. Now, those MIPS liable participants will be assigned, relative to the calculation of their MIPS adjustment, the best quality score submitted on their behalf. So if they get an APP Plus score, a group MIPS submission score, and an individual MIPS submission score, it can even be more complicated because you can put in multiple varieties of each. They will get the best score assigned to them for MIPS. So if they've made redundant submissions, if you fail to make an APP Plus submission, they'll still get scoring from something else. And it may also be important for those who will score higher on their own than they will combined with everyone else. They may want to do their own anyway to get a higher MIPS adjustment. The bottom line is that you have to think about MIPS in your ACO, whether you're an advanced APM or a MIPS APM. You might conclude it's the responsibility of each practice to think about whether or not they would benefit from a group MIPS submission, and it's the responsibility of each individual provider or their practice to decide whether or not they would benefit from an individual MIPS submission, but it is applicable. I'd also argue that even if you expect to score low, it's important to submit just to build that mechanism to collect, aggregate, and send the data. Those aren't trivial issues. You need to identify how you can increase your scores to eventually. You're not in a shared savings program to avoid collecting the shared savings. You want to do it. You need to do it. You have to invest and work in a sustained fashion to getting to the point where you can collect it. Well, I hope this has been helpful. It may be a little bit more complicated than I'd wished it was, but it makes sense. So make sure everyone gets that quality submission in.